With that, can I have a motion to approve the other items on the consent calendar?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, Jim, why don't we handle your question first, number 9?
Well, I'm wondering on number 9. First of all, what is the term, if Mr. Merrill is appointed to the Park and Rec Commission from the Holbrook Palmer Foundation, what is the term of his appointment?
Representatives from the Holbrook Park Foundation have 2-year terms.
Of what?
2-year terms?
So would he have a 2-year term? Or do the terms start different?
Yeah, but he's filling the rest of another person's term, of Richard Moore's term. So what's the remaining term?
We're gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
But council can choose to appoint him for a 2-year term,
Well,
rather than fill Richard Moore.
my question is he filling Richard Moore's term, or, exactly what's happening? And my second question on that is, was anybody else interested in that, or does the Park Foundation just decide who it is and go from there?
I believe the Park Foundation decided who they were going to.
That's all I have on that.
Okay, so do we want to have...
I have a question. Is there a clarification? I know that there's some confusion about terms, and I guess our attorney would have to clarify. It's 2 consecutive terms in whatever role you are appointed. Is that correct?
For the Park and Rec Commission?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It looks like it was never actually codified in our municipal code.
But whether you're appointed from the council or from the park, from the Dames or from the foundation, it's 2 consecutive terms and that's it.
Technically, everybody is appointed by the council.
Yes.
Dames recommend, foundation recommends,
Yes, that's
and you still appoint. And so all the appointments come from you, and 2 full terms is the maximum for appointments.
Okay.
So,
But Bill, this appointment on number 9 didn't come from us.
so it doesn't
Well,
come from you,
approved.
but it has to be approved by you.
Okay, all right.
So you're actually the appointing authority. They just make a recommendation to you as opposed to everybody else. The recommendation comes from the general public themselves volunteering to serve. This one actually comes and somebody selects it and sends it to you.
And the ordinance is silent on term limits for these 2 representatives, the Dames and the Park Foundation.
It's 2 years.
2 years.
But traditionally, when somebody fills somebody's spot, they assume the rest of their term. So if they have 6 months left on their term, then it's a 6-month appointment, and then they can restamp.
It's up to the city
Well, in the past, the
council.
tradition has been,
It's up to the city council as to how you choose to do it, though. You can appoint someone to fill an existing term if somebody retires, resigns, or leaves, or you can, since it's now the time to appoint everybody, you can just say that we're making that initial appointment right now. It's really your call.
No, it says Phil. I'd rather just leave it as Phil. One of the things that was apparent from attending the last Park and Rec Commission meeting and others that I've attended previously is that they have a number of vacancies that it looks like no one has made any attempt to fill. From the Atherton Dames, I don't know that they've ever had a representative attend. And there has been at least one other representative who has missed at least 3 meetings who has not been there. And I don't know if anyone has made any attempt to contact that person. So as has been discussed, I think we need to start getting out notice to people. And if any of you would like to be on
I think a point of order here, this is off the topic. I think that would be appropriate for the workshop on committees and commissions.
that's probably true.
that's fine.
Good point, good point, thank you.
All right.
So can we have a motion to approve or amend in any way item number 9?
I recommend we appoint Frank Merrill to fill the resignation on the Park and Rec Commission of Richard Moore.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Was there any public comment on that? All right, we move on then to number 16. Jim, that was your item.
Yeah, I've read this, and one of my concerns is that I don't believe there should be a 3-year contract. I think that there's several reasons for that. One is that we're going to be appointing a new city manager, hopefully, in the near future. And I think he should certainly have some involvement in deciding how this is going to be handled. And I think that in view of the things that are happening, I also think there are some things in that contract that I frankly really haven't had time to go through in great detail, but I think I would like to. And I would rather, if it's a one-year contract, then it certainly gives me a lot more time to look at, in more depth. And I think that, therefore, I would recommend that we change it to a one-year contract from a 3-year contract.
For clarity, is that one additional year, or is it just
1 year.
leave the 1 year that's current, because they already have a contract for 1 year?
I would say,
That runs, I think, through August? Through the middle of August or September?
22nd of September.
22nd of September.
okay,
One additional.
one additional. In other words, starting in September, whenever the present contract is termed out, then I would like to see that contract be for 1 year after that.
Are you done? I would also, I don't know quite what happened, but between us getting our packet and then this First Amendment that came through today, on an email, we lost the provision that was a suggested revision, and that was the compensation and method of payment, which I thought was a very good provision, which basically said that we would look at comps. And I recognize that there might not always be comps that are up or down, and it can go both ways, up or down. And so I like that provision in there, and with the only addition that I would make would be that the parties could agree that if there are none, no comps that are relevant, they could agree not to utilize them. But perhaps it's not important if we're only going to use a 1-year contract. I don't know how the rest of you feel. It certainly would be important for a 3-year contract, but given the fact that it's going to be a year from September, maybe we still want it in there. I leave that up to you. There is two other things. In provision number 3B2, I think that the language needs to be reworked a little bit, because as it reads right now, it says for new construction and remodel projects, 80% of the building fee paid. And that's not actually true. It's up to 80% of the building fee paid in accordance with the following formula, is what it should say, I believe. And then it refers to the consultant will return 1/6 of the 80% fee based upon how many of these inspections have been performed, which basically means 13 1/3% of each of these inspections would be returned depending upon how many were performed. I think 13 1/3% is a very odd number to have for each of these inspections, and we'd be well off to figure out some number to assign to each of these, with maybe the final given a little extra weight, rather than use this 1/6, because 13 1/3, if you take it out to its natural, and you must know what I'm talking about, you never end up with anything but a 3 at the end, and there really is it's infinity. So you can't really use that 1/6 and come up with an even number. So you've got to do something else, because it doesn't logically work in an arithmetic way.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to explain that? It's a rather confusing provision. However, what it says is that for new construction remodeling projects, 80% of the fee is to be paid. However, there are 6 major benchmarks in the inspection process, and each of those will require the consultant to pay an additional 1/6 back to us of that 80%. Once, if they haven't done any work, then they have to return 6/6 or all of the money back to us. If they've done 1/6, then it's an arithmetic formula that says how much money basically is returned from the consultant to the city, or the town, excuse me, so that we can pay their replacement to continue on with the inspections.
I understand all that, but I don't think you've heard what I've said. You can't get a 1/6 at an even amount. And it's not 80%, it's up to 80% in accordance with the formula.
Make it 78, and we're in good shape.
So, Bill, it might be worthwhile to try and clean up the language on that and then put in a potential, and for the avoidance of doubt, put an example. Make it very, very clear and make sure that the numbers add up and the numbers all calculate out to a finite number.
Integer.
They will always come out to a finite number, but it will probably never be an exact integer, because remember the amount of building fees is not itself an integer. It has some sense.
If I could suggest then, being a mathematician, then we would have some sort of rounding provision in there, and you can even identify how you'd like to round. But I think if you could clean that up, that would, when I read that, it was a little confusing as well.
It's confusing to me, I read it.
If you make it 78, it divides by 6. Everybody gets 13 until those 6.
So do we have any other comment? Jerry, do you want to make a comment?
No, I guess I'll make a comment about the provision that's no longer in there. I found that a little bit confusing in terms of how that would work as far as implementation goes, so I'm fine with leaving that out.
Mr. Mayor, can staff comment on that provision as well? It was equally confusing to staff. We couldn't figure out suitable benchmarks because, quite frankly, you'd have to find another city comparable in size that has contracted out their entire building facility. And it doesn't take into account where you live, the cost of living, and all the other issues, how far people have to travel and stuff. So we looked at it, we tried to figure out a way to make it work. But quite frankly, if you're going to make this a one-year contract, it really had to do with a benchmark that at the end of the year was used it said go up and down, and one other council member said they thought it should only go one direction. So we took it out because staff had trouble figuring out. But my suggestion is if you want it back in on a multi-year deal, then at the time the multi-year deal comes back, perhaps give us some more clarification and direction as to how to do it. And we would be glad to put it back in as an idea if in fact we can figure out how to do it. But in a one-year deal, it doesn't make any sense because by the time you go to benchmark, the contract's over.
So my only question is just for clarification. I know that Mr. Connors, we had a provision in there on, and I was happy to see that there was provision with service levels and things like that. My question is, the scope of services on paragraph 1, and you're referring to standards for paragraph 9, but the scope in the contract, paragraph 1 is the scope of services that actually has the commitment for the service levels. So I'm not sure if you take another look at that and make sure that we're amending the appropriate.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this isn't about performance levels. This is about at the end of the contract, how do we determine this is about when due to, let me go back and rephrase that. This had to do with, and I do believe it was paragraph 9 because I went and inserted it myself. The concept being that, well, I kind of agree with the mayor. This now reads conflict of interest as paragraph 9. But standard of performance, when we looked at that, this was the first time we ever had a standard of performance, and the concept was supposed to be that if due to factors beyond their control, their negligence causes a delay. And I assume that part is still okay.
Yeah, my only comment is that where they had the performance of standards. In paragraph 1, it says, is it in accordance with Schedule A, and Schedule A on page 13 says that we commit to this level, this table of services. So I think that failure to meet those would actually be referred to in paragraph 1. That's my comment.
I think you're right.
All right, so if you take a look at that, perhaps clean that up, then that's, I think it's just a technicality. So,
Could I ask a question? Lisa, perhaps you could answer it. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Training. What kind of training do the planners receive? You know who I'm talking about. I received a call from a resident who was very upset that she spoke with a planner who didn't know the difference between, felt the person hadn't read our code, didn't know the difference between an accessory structure 10 foot from the property line and an accessory structure within the building envelope at an additional 20% provision that we passed a couple of years ago or a year ago as part of the housing element. And the person started referring to other jurisdictions' laws. The resident became very upset, saying, I don't care about other jurisdictions. This is the Atherton Code I'm looking at. And this planner said, well, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. I'll have to speak with you. So what kind of training do they get?
Do you want me to answer it under this agenda item?
I think that is a good question, but it has nothing to do with this contract.
It has to do with the contract insofar as it may be a provision that we want to add if they don't get training.
Lisa's contract is a different contract. It's not.
She doesn't know about the training that Interwest receives?
I do not know what training receives.
And the contract planner, the person that the resident called and talked to, doesn't work for Interwest, he works for Lisa.
Right, so I'd be happy to talk to you about that separately.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, so I think that Jim made a recommendation, and there were some edits that were recommended by Kathy. Do we want to have a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we approve revisions to the Interwest Group contract with the modifications that we have discussed, including reducing the term from 3 years to 1 year.
One additional year.
One additional
year from the September 22nd date. No. This contract currently expires on the 22nd of September, so it will go out to 2013.
And that includes the change to the second page I discussed and Bill's change in reference to dependents.
And we will clarify paragraph 18B to so that it's more readable and makes sense.
An example would be good.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, pass. All right, next we're on item, sorry. Were there any public comments with regards to the Interwest contract extension? Sorry, I'll do better on this. Okay, item number 19 is to approve the mayor's request to South Bay Waste Management Authority member agencies to support an amendment to the JPA to allow each agency to appoint their own representative as opposed to have a specific class of person appointed or designated. So Jerry, that was your poll.
Right. I think Mr. Mayor, I think that the intent of the letter is great. I think it's long overdue to wade in on the subject. It wasn't clear to me, or it seems to me that the solution being suggested would rule out using staff members. That staff members could be appointed.
It doesn't rule
Well,
out.
I read through and I got that the tone seems to be I would say a little bit negative towards staff members. You might just take a look at that, because I know or I feel that probably in Burlingame's case, where they have the finance manager and the public works director in San Mateo, they probably would want to maintain that. Also, it's not just cities that belong to the agency, but the county and West Bay people. In my mind, the decisions that find most troubling in terms of feeling that we need to have active participation from each of the cities at each of the meetings are decisions that pertain to policies and cost structure and things like that, as opposed to the fact that they haven't maybe communicated with the cities on cost changes. I think it's up to the cities really in their participation to be on top of what's going on in their decision-making process and be part of that. So I think that's the kind of thing that you probably get a lot of agreement with and people would buy into. So I just wanted to make those comments and suggestions to you.
Okay, so,
I would,
Could we just change that sentence, Jerry?
I'm going to leave that last wording. I made my comments and prove that a letter be sent with this general counsel.
all right, so,
Actually, the motion is fine, because it says to support amending to allow each agency, it doesn't say city, their representative, it doesn't say whether it's who the
Right.
representative is.
well, I'll make it, I'll be happy to amend the letter and even have Teresa circulate it so you can see what goes
I'll
out.
leave it to your judgment.
Okay, but we'll make sure that everybody understands it's up to them to make their own appointment, staff member, resident, whatever. Okay? Are there any public comments with regards to asking each community to be able to appoint its own person to the board of the South Bay Waste Management District? Seeing no public comments, is there any further discussion? All right, can we have a motion to
So
approve
moved.
then pending edits?
Eager.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Oh, sorry, I apologize, number 8, you had a,
No problem. I would just like, and I'm not going to ask Ed to give me a number, or Deborah, give me a number now, but if at some point, and it doesn't even have to be in a meeting, but it would be nice to know what our dogs cost us. It was a little, there were a lot of Tyson costs on this last set of warrants to the tune of $1,578 just for the month of February for the police dogs. And if you extend that out 12 months, and hopefully it's not that high each month, that's a lot of money. So if we could just know what police dogs cost us on an annual basis, please. If you could send me an email and maybe copy the other council members so everybody knows. Thank you. That's all. Thank you. I move we approve the bills and claims for March 2012 with the amount of $721,800.
I'm not gonna make the same mistake 4 times. Second, any public comments on the bill registers? Seeing none, can we have a motion to?
I make the motion I prematurely made.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so now we are on to the regular agenda, and that's item number 20. And that's for introduction of a new purchasing ordinance to amend the old 3.16 that was targeted to be amended in 2010, and after lots of discussion is finally being amended. Deborah.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and members of the public. The Mayor's correct. Before you have the introduction of an ordinance, which is amending the entire chapter 3.16 of the Atherton Municipal Code. This ordinance has been worked on by many elected officials, volunteers on the audit committee, and members of staff. It recently has been reviewed by myself and our current city attorney. The ordinance presented to you, I'd like to just make sure you understand what you have before you. The staff report lists kind of a summary of what we are presenting, and I'll go over that. It lists the proposed limits, which the ordinance and the resolution setting the limits include the recommended limits approved by the audit committee. And then we have the ordinance. We purposely drafted the ordinance so that the council would set the purchasing dollar limits by resolution. So there is a resolution that is setting the dollar limits in the purchasing ordinance, and the ordinance just refers to that resolution. So I can go through and kind of summarize the sections for you. And then the other thing that we've done in this recommendation is we are recommending that the town elect to follow the uniform cost accounting procedures which are established by the state of California for certain public works projects. It allows the town to set dollar limits for public works projects that are a little bit higher than what the government code requires, which is a $5,000 limit. So we've presented the resolution that would allow the town to elect that, which many cities have. And so that's, I think, a positive thing for us. So just to walk through the ordinance, the purchasing ordinance that is currently in place, that this is replacing, it's a little outdated. It was last updated in 1994. The one presented to you, I think it is, the order of it is very logical. It introduces some things that were practices that were not put into the code. It elaborates on the definitions and the responsibilities of the purchasing officer. It is broken down into 3 separate sections. The first section sets purchasing requirements, bidding requirements, and dollar amount limits of who is allowed to approve certain purchases for equipment, supplies, and non-professional services. That's the first section. And the recommendation by the audit committee is to really keep those limits pretty much status quo right now, based on just what's going on in the town, the size of the town. Staff did some research and found that there are a lot of cities and towns that have recently updated their ordinance that have increased the dollar amounts. Just, as time goes on, there's inflation and things in cost. However, the audit committee recommended that we keep the amount that would be approved by the city manager before it has to go to council at $15,000. So anything above $15,000 will go to the city council for approval. Below that, between $5,000 and $15,000, an informal quote process will be taken where the city staff will go through and get 3 written quotes, document those. Anything below $5,000 follows the open market procedures where staff would get 3 quotes, but it wouldn't be documented in the formal process. So that's the section for goods, supplies, equipment, materials, and non-professional services. Then there's another section in the ordinance for professional services. Professional services has a specific definition. It's very much based on legal services, professional engineering services, architectural services. There's a definition in there. And it sets a limit that goes to council also of $15,000. It requires and suggests that we do requests for proposal, which is kind of writing out the specs for the service that we're requiring for anything over $15,000. And that is similar to what the current ordinance has. Below that is similar where the staff and the city manager will approve contracts that are below $15,000. And then the last section is what I spoke of before, which is introducing a new area for public works contracts. In that area, we are following still what the state code requires regarding advertising and things for items that are greater than $50,000. It sets a new limit. In the past, as I stated, it was a $5,000 limit, which is just, it's very labor intensive for us. For instance, the painting that we're doing, we would have to go out to formal bid and do advertising for that. So this is setting something for that that's a little bit more reasonable. And other agencies that have adopted this, the state adopted a new $125,000 limit. So I think the $50,000 limit is well below that and would meet the needs of the town for formal bidding. I think I would be happy to answer any questions you have regarding the ordinance, or if you'd like me to go through any specific section. The other part of the ordinance that we did add to the end has to do with surplusing assets and the rules that you would follow for donating and surplusing and reporting different assets. So that's something new that the ordinance didn't have in the past as well. And the finance director is assigned as the person that's responsible for managing that and making those decisions. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Any questions I cannot answer, I will defer to the city attorney as he's helped me make sure that we're complying with the law on this ordinance. That concludes my report.
Yes, it's me.
We all got comments, I think, but feel free to go first.
Okay. I was wondering if, in this chart, there shouldn't be a column for, under goods, supplies, equipment, materials, and non-professional services for amounts below $1,000, which require procurement cards. You cover all other amounts, but you don't cover the under, because that first purchase order required is for amounts over $1,000. And I think it should say that, over $1,000, because it just says $1,000 right now. But you don't cover the below $1,000 anywhere. And yet that requires procurement cards and department heads have to get those.
So I'll just clarify that speaking of purchase orders. And so purchase orders, issuing purchase orders is, it's a management tool. And currently our purchase order limit is $750. I'm proposing it just rounds up to $1,000. That's separate from procurement cards.
Yes.
So procurement cards, there are some dollar limits set in here in section
3.16.080.
right, and that's procurement cards. So that's not on the chart.
Right.
That's separate.
Shouldn't it be on the chart?
I didn't put it on the chart because it's just a different method of purchasing. So anything over $1,000, and it does say up to $1,000 in the ordinance. So the staff report doesn't say that. But anything below $1,000 doesn't require a purchase order and could be used on a credit card.
Okay. Well, when you look at this, everything else explains what happens below $1,000. And I think it's unclear what happens below $1,000. So I think just for the sake of covering everything, it would be helpful to say procurement cards below $1,000. And also add the word over $1,000 here, because that's the only time a purchase order applies. Then you have, under professional contract services, under informal proposals, you say 3 informal proposals desired. Are they not required? On page 12, it says they shall get 3 informal proposals. Is it elective, or?
In that section, it is required.
Then
So I
should
can
that
change the
word be
language there
changed
as
to
well.
required rather than desired?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we like to be wishy-washy in the legal field because sometimes you can't get 3 people because there aren't 3 people. And so we say shall, but shall is directive, there's no penalty. So I think that the chart is probably more correct than the ordinance in terms of what do we do if we need somebody to provide some kind of an audio-visual or a computer service that is proprietary and is only done by one company.
Well, I think that there's
Exactly,
a provision later on.
There
that
is a
explains
provision
that.
for sole source, but the problem is sometimes there's 1 or 2 vendors, and it's just, it just makes it easy. We can certainly make it less wishy-washy if that makes it more clear.
I think that's a good idea.
Yep. And there is also on page 5, it says at the very bottom, procurement of goods and supplies, equipment, materials, and professional services over $1,000. So professional services over $1,000 require a purchase order?
That's correct.
Okay, so under professional services, shouldn't it say that it requires a purchase order as well?
Those are no audit committee.
The purchase order section, which is 3.16070, is called out separately from those 3 categories. So it's kind of an umbrella overlaying the categories that is requiring that any professional or non-professional service, goods and supplies and equipment, that we do we do require purchase orders. Now, purchase orders are a committing document that the city sends out to a vendor. It's also a budgeting document that's encumbering something. So it's kind of an umbrella over these other types of categories. So that's why it's not repeated in those, each of those sections. Those separate sections don't really call out that purchase orders are required because the 070 is a bit of an umbrella over those.
But how would you know when you get to professional services that it requires a purchase order when it's not there?
There are several other items in the beginning and the ending of this ordinance that encompass the entire purchasing process. And so,
Wouldn't it be
Well,
wise
what-
just to repeat it?
Why can't we just add the extra words to just, for the, you know, elimination of any doubt? Just add that in, and it's repetitive, and that's okay. Repetitive is better than none.
I can do that.
Okay.
Also, I don't know when we say what we think, but in looking at the comparable jurisdictions and what they have done, I noticed that, where are the comps?
Attachment 5.
No, I'm looking in my supply. If you can find it in this pile, I'd be thankful. No, because I have my notes. I'll get to it. Okay, oh, I see. On page 6, 3.16.080, it says lower limits may be established. At what point do procurements by committee members enter into this purchasing ordinance?
Procurements by committee members.
Yes, we have had committee members in the past make procurements, whether it's art committee on occasion or the EPC committee has done a lot of procurement. How do these purchasing regulations apply to these committee members?
All spending of city funds fall under